Hi everybody. I'm just going to make a few videos to put out there before the exam to help you with your artistic vocabulary, and so you can get a good idea of the kinds of things to think about. This is especially useful for your optional questions, so a painting you've never seen before and responding to it in the kind of 20 to 30 minutes that you have. This is good for National 5 and higher, although these specific prompts are more National 5 prompts, but you'll find them in higher as well. So let's go. This has got to be quick. So composition, what have we got to be thinking about? These things. Focal point, viewpoint, framing, rule of thirds, rule of odds, depth and distance, leading lines. You could also be thinking about geometry, diagonals, energy being created, anything to do with the way the painting has been organised, what's in it, where it is, why it's been arranged like that. Pose, facial expression as well, actually, could be added on to this. Okay, so I've got some books in front of me. I'm going to randomly pick through and imagine we were getting these for optionals. So this one here. First thing I would think about with this one, composition-wise. Lovely glare on the picture there. Okay, so look at her eyes, look at the way she's looking right at you. So viewpoint for this one, very interesting. Can you see how she's looking at us? Look at the reflection in the mirror behind. You can see the back of her head, and then you can see this man's face. So this artist wants us to feel that we are the man in the painting on the right hand side in the top hat. She's looking into his eyes, he's looking into her eyes, and we are looking into her eyes. So viewpoint here, very important. We are looking right into this woman's eyes. She's serving us at the bar. This is how the artist is making us feel part of the scene. So comment, locate, justify. What you'd say is the viewpoint of this painting appears to be from the customer's point of view. We can tell this because we're looking right into the serving girl's eyes. This creates a feeling of being part of the painting. It welcomes us into the painting, makes the viewer feel as if they are actually present in the scene rather than just watching the scene from afar. There you go. There's one point. I've just said it in quite a waffly manner. You could probably say it more succinctly, but I haven't prepared this chat. I'm looking at paintings and I'm just telling you what I think off the cuff from paintings that come to me. So focal point for that one. Interesting. Depth and distance. Look at this. Very, very obvious. Very clear foreground, because the objects are very large and they're very beautifully clearly painted. Midground appears to be, by the way, she's in the foreground. Midground appears to be what's directly behind her, the mirror, the reflection of these bottles. Background, we can see far, far into this bar, which is behind her. And what's really interesting is if you look carefully, it looks a bit like this is another mirror behind these people, because look, I don't know, maybe not, I don't know. It just looks like there's a bit of a reflection going on there. Anyway, fuzzy, fuzzy painting far away, lots of thick paint and application, no detail, more washed out colours. Therefore, we get a clear sense of foreground, midground and background of depth and distance. Rule of thirds, we could say, is applied to this painting quite well, because look at how you could say it's divided into thirds. This third being her reflection, this third being actually her, and this third being all the accoutrements, the bottles and the bar and so on the left-hand side. So it's divided equally up like this, which just creates a nice satisfying balance and makes you feel like the painting has been very well organised and is kind of nice and easy on the eye. Again, when you're looking at a painting, imagine if it wasn't divided into thirds. Imagine this is a square painting and it looked like that. I don't know, it wouldn't have that same, to me, it wouldn't have that same sense of satisfaction and kind of balance as it does with this half on it as well, or this third, I should say, on it as well. Okay, so rule of thirds, I think, is obviously used in this painting, certainly in the vertical sense. Okay, so that's us talked a bit about viewpoint, a bit about depth and perspective and distance, and a bit about rule of thirds and how these things have all helped this painting to be quite a successful piece of work. We could talk a bit about pose for composition. Look at the way she's leaning on the bar. Look at the heels of her hands, leaning on the bar. She's leaning forward slightly, and look at her expression. To me, she looks quite tired. She looks quite oh, like she's had a long night at this bar. And this is the kind of comment you can make for composition as well. Pose and facial expression comes into the composition. So comment, locate, justify. You could say the serving girl or the barmaid has a very, let's start that again. I'm not into this editing these videos, I'm not going back. The serving girl is leaning against the bar, shoulders slightly down, leaning forward and looking into our eyes with a kind of glazed, bored expression. This gives us the impression that she's had a hard night working, you know, sleeves are up and so on. There's loads of bottles everywhere. And she's tired. That's how she seems to me. That's what I get. And after all, art is about what we perceive to see, what we understand. And in my opinion, she looks tired, she looks bored, she doesn't look full of life and zest and sort of welcomingness. She's kind of like, I feel like she's had enough now. And I get that because of her pose and her expression. Hooded eyes and so on. Okay, so there you go. Lots of things you could say about composition for that one. Let's have a quick flick. What else have we got going on here? Ooh, Clint. I had another good one here for composition. Oh, here's another nice one. Surah. So this is pointillism. So we're not going to talk about media handling because that's not what this is really all about, apart from I could just mention it's all been done in tiny dots. But composition for this one, look at the leading lines and look at the repetition of these angles. Okay, it adds a sense of drama and of energy. So you could say comment, locate, justify. In this painting, there are lots of repetitive, dynamically angled or diagonally angled lines. Okay, we can see this in the raised girls' legs, or the raised girls. Ugh, the raised legs of the girls, the dancing girls. See, it's hard for me, but you know I'm at a certain time of life, right? I've got an excuse. So diagonal raised legs of these dancing girls, repeating. And look at how her arm, also holding this fan or whatever it is following that same angle. And then you've got the repetition of the legs that are on the ground, which is beautifully echoed in the neck of this double bass. Even if you don't know that's a double bass, doesn't matter. Just say the neck of the instrument, okay? And the angle of this guy's arm here. There's this beautiful repetition of diagonal, okay? Even the way the face is pointing up. And so that creates a sense of energy. It makes it really look like these people are moving. It kind of makes you feel like it's sweeping up in the air. You can hear the music playing almost. So, you know, put that into comment, locate, justify. You could talk a bit about framing here. Look at this framing. This is the kind of thing I want you to notice. A very clear L shape in the background, framing these girls. Now, how do we describe that? Looks like the edge of the stage and the side of the stage, the wing of the stage. If you just talked about the vertical and the sort of slightly diagonal edge of the stage there and how the girls are all fitting into that space, that's a very clear method of framing that this artist has used to draw our attention to this group of girls on the right hand side. Again, imagine that wasn't there. Imagine that was all just fuzzy grey. It doesn't, I don't think it would have the same sense of location, of space, kind of where these girls actually are. I think it helps to set the scene that this is on a stage. Okay, so we've talked about framing and we've talked about the diagonals, the leading lines, yeah, and the energy created by that. Even the way this man's face is looking up, and we've got a diagonal line here, okay, his nose, his hat pointing up, leading to the girls. This again would get you a mark if you explained that you noticed that. And the man on the far left, he's pointing or looking up towards the girls this way. So all focus is on them. Okay, so there's a lot of deliberate organisation going on here to try and create a bit of movement and a bit of drama. This painting here is by Surah as well. And this is very different. It looks very still. Why does it look still? Because everything is very vertical and upright and nobody seems to be moving. We don't have thrown about legs here. We've got very straight arms down, legs down. This is a very serene picture. It's mimicking the upright nature of the trees. So the figures themselves are nice and tall and vertical. And it's a very repetitive, you know, figure, 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 tree, figure, 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 tree. It's very repetitive. and it's spaced out from the foreground all the way through to the mid, all the way through to the background, trees far away and figures far away, which kind of lends the whole thing a very serene sense of staticness. It's very still, it's very calm. One of the other reasons it's calm, apart from the lack of movement and the lack of diagonals, is that the artist has made this with pointillism, which is tiny, tiny dots of paint. So we don't have any thrown around fast moving paint here. Everything has been precisely, slowly organised and laid out. So that's not to do with composition, that's media handling, but I thought it was interesting. If I hold it up a bit closer, you can maybe see that. This is an enormous painting. Tells you, it doesn't tell you on the page, but it's several meters. Okay, so there's a bit more composition there. Let's get some more composition. Oh, composition of this. What's going on here? Ooh, very fragmented. Okay, so if you were to talk about the composition of this painting, you would probably talk about how it's quite confused. There doesn't seem to be a sense of perspective and depth. It's very, it looks to me, I've never really looked at this painting before, Delaunay. Okay, so we've got figures, what looks to be figures, and then parts of buildings and bridges. Maybe buildings in the background here, maybe these are mountains. There's trees. It's quite hard to tell exactly what everything is. And this is me talking about it as a teacher that's never really studied, never really looked at this painting before. So if you were looking at it, I'm hoping you would recognise that it's quite confused. There doesn't seem to be a very clear sense of foreground, midground, background. Apart from, I suppose you could make a comment about how the figures are very tall, from the very base of the painting to the top, but they're obviously in the foreground, whereas we see what looks like a bridge and houses further away. Yeah, we could talk about distance there, but because everything's broken up into these weird geometric shapes, it's quite hard to see in places where one thing finishes and the next thing starts. So there is a bit of a lack of unity in this painting, I think. And also because there's random bits of building kind of pasted in between figures, and that adds to the sense of confusion and kind of lack of cohesion, as I was saying before. So an interesting composition, that one. There is repetition in the figures. It's like dancing figures. What's this called? The City of Paris, 1912. So it's a bit later than those other paintings we looked at. This is where art starts to become a bit more avant-garde, a bit more forward-thinking and much more modern. So we can see the artist using this sort of strange cubist-y style, which was becoming popular at that point. But compositionally, you could talk about repetition of figures, and you could talk about that depth and distance and how it either is or isn't easily seen. I would say it is seen in some ways and it's more difficult in other ways, but you could try and describe that via the ways that I've just kind of mentioned. Okay, gosh, what else is in here? Should have really got some other stuff out for you. How about, let's look at this. Some Degas. Okay, this is interesting because this is so typical of Degas. Degas used cameras to get his compositions. So you can see, you know, it looks like he snapped a photo really early on in the development of photography. And what's interesting here to me is that there is a frame going on, but it's framing nothing. It's, you know, what I mean by that is, look, there's a man just coming in from the left-hand side, just entering the canvas. This man is just leaving the canvas, and look, he's got a brolly under his arm pointing towards this huge big space. So this is very, very well organised by Degas. He wants us to notice the big space that's here, created by this man here, the little girl and the dog, horizontal, lovely horizontal nose pointing towards this direction, encasing this whole area with a lovely big gap behind, with the trees, a little monument and a little horse and cart over here. So this is called Place de la Concorde. So the place, Concorde Square, whatever, in Paris. So this is the title of the painting. And he's drawing our attention to that. By the way, he's put his figures in. His figures are lovely. I love this painting, actually. It's very unstaged. It appears to be very unstaged. Looks very casual. Looks as if we're just walking through this square and the scene has just been captured. Very different to how painting would have been previous to that. Very, very set up and organised. Like, oh, let me just see if I can find a very quick example of what I'm talking about. Well, something like this, which is obviously very, very staged, isn't it? This isn't a naturalistic composition. This is kind of, all these figures would have been drawn from figures in a studio, and then placed in the canvas much more kind of imaginatively, whereas I think Degas is actually going out and he's snapping people walking about. Same here as well. So this is very organised and staged, whereas Degas is far more casual. Another beautiful example of framing by Degas. So there's the woman performing on stage, and we can see this lovely L shape created by the vertical and the horizontal. And then the lovely diagonal that's there as well, of whatever that is, the backdrop in a stage or something. So we really, really focus on the focal point of her because of this lovely kind of, there it is there, lovely framing. Even her angle of her arm. Imagine she was just standing up straight there. It wouldn't have the same impact. It's because she's at an angle and her arms are at an angle here, mimicking that angle of this curtain or backdrop, whatever it is. You know, it really helps. And then this little person caught in the frame down here, audience member. Okay, again, it's almost like we're watching this from afar without really maybe supposing to be there. It's like we're spying almost. Okay. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff about composition. I'll see if I can add a little bit more with a few more paintings.